Well, you made it. Here we are, the final review. Let's dive in. So, for your final, you are going to be tested on everything that we've covered throughout the semester. And so, yeah, the best way to prepare is to review all your homework and PowerPoints, all that's available to you. Um, I'm sure a lot of you guys use it during the test as well. And, that's fine. So long as you are being resourceful, I'm okay with that. Um, You're going to see a lot of stuff on here. You're going to see some notes on here, but I know not all of you will watch these videos, so that's why I include as much notes on the PowerPoints as I do. But let's go through it. The first half of this review is just what you saw for the midterm review. Like I said, because you're going to be tested on everything. So let's go. All right, so if you remember back at the beginning of the semester, we talked about sources of water. Right? So you're going to want to know the differences between surface water and groundwater. Know the different types, what are the different types of thermal stratification, the hypomelion, hypermelion, different types of aquifers, whether they're artesian, etc. All the components of a well, you know, the well casings, seals, and then, of course, emergency alternative sources. And then, if you can recall, yeah, we had a little bit of groundwater math that we did. So let's do a quick problem just to kind of brush up on it again before we dive back in there. Uh, so you have well A that contains 48 parts per billion of arsenic and is flowing at 450 gallons per minute. Well B contains 52 parts per billion of arsenic and is flowing at 275 gallons per minute. And well C contains 20 and is flowing at 600 gallons per minute. What's the resulting concentration of arsenic? Right. So here's the formula, right? The composite parts per billion will equal well A, right, arsenic times the flow, and then well B's flow times the level of arsenic, well C, plus well C's flow times the arsenic, and then you're going to total up the total flow and divide that by your calculation. So that's how it all would spell out. You break it down until your answer is 35.7 parts per billion. Right, so that is the concentrating level of arsenic. We covered pipes, right? Know the parts of a pipe, the bell, the spigot, the soffit, the crown, belly. Know the difference between the types of pipe, right? You have AC, CMLC, PVC, ductile. The pipe characteristics, that's referring to like the strengths, permeability, just some of those characteristics. Methods for preventing cave-in, so you're talking shoring, shielding, sloping. Know the process of putting a main valve in service, or excuse me, a main in service, right? So you're having to hydrostatically test it, you're having to chlorinate it, and then Bactea it. So just being familiar with that. And then we got dosing calculations. You guys should be really sharp on these by now. So by now, yeah, you should be really familiar with this formula. We're not going to do a problem. Like I said, you guys should have this one locked down pretty tight by now. You know that you're doing parts per million times 8.34 times a million gallons per day, which give you your pounds. And then if you have to figure out the percent, you need to divide it. So should be good to go on this one by now. Right, valves. We covered some of the topics on valves were functions, classifications, the uses, and then how to calculate force, right? So here we go. Let's calculate some force, right? So you have a closed 36-inch Sidewinder valve. On one side, you have 0 psi. On the other, you have 136 psi. What is the force against the closed surface area of the valve? So there's your formula. You know, 0.785 times diameter squared times 144 inches squared per feet squared times psi. So if we hop all the numbers from the question into the formula, you wind up getting, let's see here. Yeah, 138,361 pounds of force, right? So brush up on one of those. I believe there is a one. I think I put in one of these questions. So, have this at the ready to help you out. Ooh, little secondary question here, right? So if you have that amount of force, you know, what having that much force is why you would have a bypass valve installed, right? Because you wouldn't be able to operate the valve if there was that much force against it. Math. All right. We obviously covered a lot of math. I'm sure you've covered math in other classes as well. So know your math, pay attention to your units, right? Any questions on math, please email me ahead of time. Don't wait until you're getting right into this final before you ask for help. Um, says here, if you want to practice any type of math, please feel free to shoot me some questions if you got them, and I'm happy to kind of break them down for you and show you, how they work. All right, we covered safety. We want to know the divisions of responsibilities. That'd be like employee, supervisor, manager, um, regulatory requirements, lockout, tagout, confined space, your injury, illness, and prevention program, HAZCOM, the dangers of asbestos pipe. Yeah, we spent quite a bit on that. And then you don't need to know math for this section. Administration, record keeping, you want to understand utility management, know the Safe Drinking Water Act. Specifically, you probably want to know what year. Um, you want to know a little bit about planning, like the difference between short term, long term, the difference in capital. You're talking revenues, you're talking debt servicing, all sorts. Right? The revised total coliform rule, the disinfection byproduct rule, lead copper rule, and record keeping requirements. Just kind of having an understanding that there's typically a records retention policy that most agencies have, and how you store your records is also equally important. And then there was a little bit of financial math that we did. So remember how to do that? Well, here's a problem in case you forgot. So you have a pump that has been in operation for tens of thousands of years and operates at 1 billion gallons per minute with a total dynamic head of able 1/8, yeah, blah, 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 right? I was trying to be funny. Anyway, the pump uses 6,135 kilowatts per month at 0.079 cents per kilowatt hour. If the pump efficiency is 65%, how long will it take to pay for a new pump rated at 91% that costs $13,425? So obviously the first few numbers I gave you, the first two numbers, have nothing to do with this problem, right? That's why I made them so extravagant, right? So I don't want them to throw you off. I did this on purpose so that way when you see one of these problems on your exam, you know you could just, disregard those numbers. However, the other numbers, your kilowatts per hour, cost, percents, efficiencies, those are all important. You need to pay attention to those. All right. So what do we know about the old pump? Is that the operating cost is 61 or 6,135 kilowatt per hour per month, and then you multiply that by 0.079 kilowatts per hour, which gives you your cost. Okay, and your cost is $484.67. The new pump, right? So here we're going to divide the old pump's efficiency versus, you're going to divide it from the new pump's efficiency. And then again, you're going to use those same numbers because those are fixed costs from your electric company. And what you'll find is that, the operating costs of the new pump is only $346.19. However, we need to know, you know, what we're asking here is how long will it take to pay for a new pump rated at at those numbers? So if we subtract the 346 from the 484, and then we calculate that over a 12-month period, we come up with $1,661.76 per year in savings. All right. But then the question was how long, right? So we looked at that cost. We said, hey, this pump's going to cost us $13,425. So if we divide that by the $1,661, we get 8.08 years. So that's your ROI, or your return on investment. Pumps and motors, right? A lot of stuff that we covered there. Um, you know, just kind of brush up on all this stuff, right? You want to know the uses, the categories, the difference in the different types. You want to understand suction lip versus suction head. So these are all things that, you just want to brush up on. And then water quality, right? So know about your disinfectants, know about chlorine, the different fusible plugs, right? So if you have a 1-ton cylinder, you're going to have 6 plugs. Um, you want to know about chlorine feed rates. These are all things that were covered in the PowerPoint there. And then documenting, and then of course we touched on backflows, right? Just understanding the different types, the AVB, the SVB, double check, RP, air gap. Those are all things that could possibly be on your final exam. So, electricity and instrumentation and controls, we covered the different types of circuits, Ohm's law, the different categories. We covered telemetry and, 4 to 20 calculations. Um, so there's the potential for all of this to be on your exam. So make sure you're ready for it. Here's a quick problem, valve position indicator showing 48% open. What is the reading in a milliamp on an ohmmeter? So you would take that 100% divided by 16 milliamps and it gets you 6.25% per milliamp. So you can see my little note here, this is a constant, um, and explains where that 6.25 comes from. So then you would take that 6.25, right? And like the problem says, you have 48% open, so you would want to divide 48 by 6.25, and then you should have 7.68 milliamps on your ohmmeter. Ta-da! All right, mapping, you've got, comprehensive map, sectional map, you can have hydrant maps. So just knowing the different types, knowing the kind of information that would be kept on a map, is another one that you want to know. There is, you know, some maps that, will have valves on it, will have blow-offs, right? So those are going to be a little bit more detailed. Information management, so we're talking GIS, just be familiar with that. And then how to calculate stationing. So that was for example, 110 plus 28, station marking, and then let's say downstream you had, something else, 218 plus 37, it's like, what's the difference between the two, right? So knowing how to calculate stationing, well, I believe you'll come across a problem or two about that. So you're in luck. This semester ended up the way it did because I'm going to help you out by posting the answer keys to all the homework quizzes. I will have taken them down for the day of the final, but I highly recommend you utilize this resource while it's available. You can find them in the week 14 folder subfolder titled resources. There you go. My gift to you, right? So have at it. Get your answer keys for all your homework quizzes. I know that, throughout the semester I have just, told you what the answer was. like if you got it wrong, I pointed out the correct one. But in my answer keys, I, I do break them down to show you how you go about solving these things. So with that, if you have any questions between now and when you take your final, please don't hesitate to reach out and ask them. With that, good luck.